just a few short weeks, the doors to my Working Artist course will be opening for enrollment. If you're ready to take bold new steps to turn your creativity into a sustainable revenue stream, then I want to invite you to sign up for this 12-week comprehensive online training. When you enroll, you'll be joining a group of artists from around the world who are not only wanting to make better art, but are ready to set up solid systems to connect their art with an art audience that's ready to buy. This course is super practical and will give you all the tools you need to promote and sell your art online and at in-person events. Head over to www.soniasmallhere.com/The Working Artist course and join the waitlist. Not only will I keep you posted about the latest course information, but I have something extra special for you. I hope to see you in the course.
You know, a lot of artists are afraid of the business side of their work. And for me, it's actually a really creative part of what I do. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy developing some products that I can print my images on. And I enjoy that engagement with the outside world. And right now, being able to do it online so much is great, partly because I'm pretty introverted and would rather just be posting things on social media or like communicating online than at a big opening talking to 100 people at once. So that's pretty conducive to my personality. But I think I've just always not shied away from promoting myself because that's the only way it's going to happen. I don't buy into the starving artist mindset that I think we're taught that real artists should have. And I don't think that becoming successful selling your work dilutes what you do. I think having to work a bunch of other jobs and draining your energy away from your art, I think that really dilutes what you do. So I find it just really important to not box yourself in or deny yourself opportunities that could really benefit your work and give you more time to do it.
My name is Sonia Small here. I'm an artist, an art coach, and a course creator. When I graduated from the Art Academy, I had learned how to paint and how to draw, but I had no idea how to earn a living with my creativity. I was not prepared for the life as a working artist. This often left me quite frustrated, sometimes on the verge of calling it quits, throwing away my brushes and giving it all up. But I'm so glad I didn't. After many failed attempts and valuable lessons learned, I've discovered ways to turn my creative dream of being a working artist into a reality, now giving me the freedom to live the life I love. I created the Help I'm Artist podcast because no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out or maybe you've been a working artist for a while, you too can take steps to turn your creative passions into a meaningful, sustainable profession. The Help I'm Artist podcast is filled with fresh inspiration, step-by-step practical insights, and interviews with artists who are experts in their field. If you're a smart artist or one in the making who is looking for new and exciting ways to get your art out of your studio and into the hands and hearts of an audience that's appreciative and willing to pay its worth, then you're in the right place. Happy listening. During a trip to Boise, Idaho, I had the privilege to meet today's guest. A mutual friend took me along to meet this inspiring artist during open studio days. Now it's hard to imagine nowadays, but the studio of Rachel Teannalach was packed. A buzz and excitement filled the space as art enthusiasts mulled around to admire and purchase her art and other art-related products. This sparked my curiosity. What was Rachel doing to attract so many people? And what inspires her? And how did she become that successful working artist? In today's conversation, contemporary landscape painter Rachel Teannalach shares more about her art story. She shares more about her compulsion to paint, her daily painting projects, and how she's found ways to juggle being a busy mom and live the life of a successful working artist. Enjoy our conversation. Rachel, thank you for joining me for this talk all about art, about your art career, all the way there in the USA. Please just tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you married? Do you have a family? And where are you?
Right now, I'm spending the weekend in Sun Valley, Idaho, and it's beautiful and there's snow on the ground and bright blue sky. But normally I'm in Boise, Idaho. My name is Rachel Teannalach, and I live there with my 1.5-year-old daughter, Saoirse, and my 4.5-year-old daughter, Mairead, and my husband, Sean. And I'm originally from northern New Mexico and grew up painting landscapes there, and then went to college in Southern California and lived in the Bay Area for some years after that. And meanwhile, my parents retired in Idaho, and I kind of wanted to be closer to family and out of the stress of the Bay Area. So I ended up in Idaho also.
So you are a working artist. There are a lot of working artists listening, people that are aspiring to be artists. When did you know that this was something that you wanted to pursue seriously?
It's been something I've always wanted to do. I have a sign in my studio or drawing from when I was 5 that said I want to be an artist, and my mom kept that for me. But I've done other things along the way to support my art financially, but I've never, well, I have moments of fear where I thought about going into something more certain, but yeah, I've always wanted to be an artist.
So this is something that you pursued right out of high school, or what steps did you take to prepare yourself to be a working artist?
Yeah, I went to women's college in Southern California and I studied art there. When I finished school, I went right into continuing to paint. I probably had about 6 jobs for the 6 years that I lived in the Bay Area, and all at the same time, not in 6 years. But I always reserved time to paint, found places to exhibit my work, and just stayed focused on the end goal of that.
What kind of art are you making?
Yeah, I describe my paintings as contemporary landscape. That's a kind of a vague description, but to me that means I don't really follow very traditional landscape techniques. I paint alla prima and use real bold brush strokes that I don't go back and retouch. So it has a little bit more of a contemporary modern feel to it, though my subject matter is very traditional.
So landscapes, you're outdoors, I see a lot of local vistas that you are painting, so very much involved with the nature as well. We'll get more into that later in the conversation. You studied art. I know you went abroad to study art. What did you all do to prepare? Can you give us some specifics?
Well, technique-wise, I just kept practicing, and yes, as you said, I studied at the Glasgow School of Art in their painting program when I was a junior in college, and also at a art school in Florence called Studio Art Centers International. And there in Florence, I kind of dabbled and experimented with other media, took sculpture and photography, just kind of had a fun semester abroad, but in Glasgow is a little bit more focused on painting. Then I finished school. I had a painting professor there who really influenced me a lot. His name's Enrique Martinez Celaya. He's a Cuban-born painter who was teaching at Pomona College, and I think he really instilled in me the attitude that the art was important, and that if you're going to do it full-heartedly, and don't diminish the trade by not putting everything you can into it. So I think that focus and seriousness really helped me to take myself seriously. Then out of college, I just kept painting and would find exhibition spaces, non-traditional ones, in coffee shops, and even had like little home studio openings in the little beach town that I lived in. And yeah, just everywhere I could to get my work out there. But I think most importantly was I just kept on painting just almost every day from college onward.
And that's something that came easy and natural to you, or is it something that you needed to really put into like a routine into place, or find a way to do that every day, really fight for your artistry?
I think before I had kids, it was easier. I mean, it was more of I think painting's a compulsion for me. So it's not like it's hard to get myself to do it every day. Sometimes I have lots of other things that are fighting for my time. Those early years, in my early 20s, I would paint when I came home from my multiple jobs, late into the night. So I always was working on something. I had a little corner of the kitchen set up as my studio. And it was funny because I remember a painting professor telling me when I got out of school that you just needed to set aside an hour every day to work on your art, no matter what else. And I just thought, how silly that she thinks that's all I'm going to do is an hour a day. That's simple. And it in my earlier years, that was, I could do 3 or 4 hours a day, even though I was juggling all these other jobs. But now having a family and having a lot of business to deal with around my art, which I didn't have back when I wasn't as established. It's kind of ironic sometimes, like the more successful maybe you get, the less time you have to do it. And so now I can see what her point, like that 1 hour of like sacred working time where you're not on your computer and you're not distracted. It's hard to find sometimes.
What would you advise starters starting out? Maybe they've just finished their studies, to prepare them for the life of a working artist.
I don't know if there's anything you can do to prepare. I think it's just going through the evolution and the experience and everyone's distinct paths. Art is so different than many other fields where there's no like way to get there, and there's no there. So you're just constantly recreating and making it every day. There's no point where you've made it. Yeah, so to answer your question, I don't know if there's too much that you can prepare besides just prepare to be flexible and to be determined and focused, and always keep the development of your own work as the most important thing, because you can always catch up with other stuff later. But if you miss out on making your art and going through those developments internally, I think you can't make that up.
Can you just explain that a little bit, that development? What do you see in your own career? How do you see your own art evolve?
Well, it's neat because it's something that you don't have to necessarily be aware of or be trying to make happen. I think just putting in the time and, working with your hands and creating what you create every day, it just will happen on its own. And there's moments where you're aware, oh, something different is happening. Maybe you're seeing something different or wanting to use a different material. But I think often it's just kind of happening very slowly. And that was one thing that my daily paintings helped me do, was to just have this sort of autopilot of development going on without, even though, whatever was happening in my life might seem to be more of the focus, there was like this underlying synthesis. Yeah, I think just keep doing it and keep that sacred making time for yourself, and the development will happen on its own. And then whatever happens in your life or that's parallel occurring in your life will influence it too. And those two things can just work in symbiosis with each other.
You mentioned your daily painting challenges. I know that you've had nearly 4 years that you've been painting daily. Can you explain a little bit about that tiny expense project or challenge that you have been doing?
Yeah. So just to make sure everyone knows, that's not 4 consecutive years. It's been 4 different years where I've decided to do a year of daily painting. And it's been in a pretty short period of time. It's been over the last 6 years that I've done those 4 years. But I had breaks for when my babies were born and stuff. And I would just start when I just got the impulse to do it. And I think that that's an important part of the project for me, that I got to this point where, I'm not looking around and noticing beauty around me as much as I should. I have too many distractions from that sacred studio time. And so I felt like this need to start that practice again. And I think just like any daily practice is a discipline, and it's training yourself in a certain way towards a certain goal. And then when it stops having that efficacy, then your practice needs to change, and I'll finish the year and not start again. So I know one year I started because my daughter was maybe 8 months old and I was on my phone a lot, and I thought, gosh, I would really rather her see me painting every day than sitting here on my phone all the time. So that was an impetus for that. I can remember the first like tiny expanse painting that I did. I didn't call it that yet, but it was a little 2.5 by 3.5 inch canvas that I painted on when I was living in Muir Beach in California. I didn't start every day at that point. That was back in probably 2007. But over the course of the next 5 years, I probably did a couple hundred or a couple thousand of them. At this point, I've probably done about 7,000 of those small paintings. So
Wow.
yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah, and there's some really cool photos on your website. People should go and have a look. And I know that you had an exhibition, that there's a video that they could see too, with all the year all put together from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. And it just gives such an amazing overview of life, because there are all kinds of themes that you are painting every day.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the small paintings have helped me do, is expand what I paint, because they're so small that it's not scary to try something different, like portraiture or, architecture. So at this point, I feel very confident painting pretty much anything in front of me, just because I've done so many different things, and I've come to realize it's all just light and color and form, and there's not one thing that's scarier than another thing to paint.
Did you have a set time every day that you thought, that you were saying, okay, now it's my daily painting moment, or was it just when it sort of happened, when life happened?
Before I had kids, I thought about it a little bit more and strategized, and I could always get to where I wanted to go that day. I think with kids, well, maybe in a way I've had to be even more planned out with it but when the plan didn't work out, I've had to be a lot more spontaneous with it. So it's been both extremes, I guess, in the last couple of years. But I always feel good when I get it done early in the morning. It sort of nags at me if I haven't finished, and I'm thinking I don't want to be up till 11 o'clock that night
to get it done, because then the next day is happening.
Right. And also being plein air, I don't want to always be painting the night sky or painting a candle. I want like good lighting and get that prime time of the day. I think for it to be a fulfilling practice, I have to prioritize it. Otherwise, it just feels like a side note and just something I'm trying to get off of my list. So when I have a couple days in a row where I have not made it a priority, I start to feel kind of muddy about it. It just feels really good to go in and focus and make it important.
Do these paintings have a destination? Is it just something you do for yourself, or are they for sale?
Over those 4 years of daily paintings, I've sold them differently. The first 2 years I kept together as 365 piece collections, and actually the same collector bought both years. And then the second and third years, I have sold them throughout as the year went through. Like when I post them on Instagram and Facebook, I also post them on my Etsy site. So by the end of this last year, I had 2/3 of them sold, and then I sold more at the exhibition. And then at the end of the exhibition, just last week, they all were picked up or mailed out to their collectors, which is a strange feeling of these things I've been hoarding and keeping so special for the year. All of a sudden, they're just getting dispersed.
Wow! So everyone has a part of your year.
Yeah.
All over the place. Okay. And then you have the Grounded project that you have been working on also for the last, you said it's a seasonal, so you have a daily project and then you have a monthly project. Can you just tell us more about that?
Yeah, the monthly one this was the first time I've done that, and it felt like a very sustainable, organic process for me. So I anticipate doing those most years. But this first year was called Ground, and I picked a spot in the Boise foothills where I lived, where I went around the same time every month, and I would take a bunch of photos and collect flowers and plants that were blooming during that particular moment, and go home and do a collaged painting of them. It was a square painting. And then by the end of the year, I had 12 18 by 18 inch paintings that represented the whole cycle of the year.
Okay, and then you made that into an installation, I saw. Very interesting how you did that with that aluminium, I think, tiles that you printed right on.
Yeah, I printed 6 copies of each painting, the same size as the original, and laid them out in 2 different ways. I had 2 different shows of it. One was just a big grid on the floor of my studio, and people could come in and walk on it. And then the next installation was at a gallery, and it started on the floor but then went up the wall. And it was a little bit more playful of an installation.
So the original pieces were intermixed with the prints of the pieces. So it made an interesting pattern, like a mosaic.
Yeah, kind of pixelated.
And these are functional tiles. People can use them as backdrops or as a splash tile, or so it goes from a painting into a functional object.
Yeah, I've had fun with that kind of merchandising aspect, but or just functional art. We're gonna use some of the sets that are left over to tile our bathroom floor. So yeah, they're printed with a technique that's used to print on the side of boats. So it's weatherproof and very durable.
Durable, yeah, wonderful. So it gets a totally new life in a different setting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that exhibition now has ended, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, it came down last week. Uh-huh.
Okay. And what were some of the reactions, people that interacted with both the weekly or the daily and the monthly art?
Yeah, that's a fun part of the Tiny Expanse year. Each of those paintings is very personal, obviously, to me, and I have a lot of memories of where I was and what was happening when I did that painting. But then for somebody looking at it, they don't have any of that background, but they might have their own personal connection to that place, or if they're from Boise, they'll see a lot of familiar things, or they'll have a date that something significant happened and they'll want to buy that piece regardless of what the image is. So I think having that experience where, for me it's personal and that makes it kind of universal, and then it becomes personal to somebody else. I like that transaction. The ground project, people really had fun walking on it, because I encouraged people to take off their shoes and walk on the tiles, especially kids. It was fun seeing them. They just kind of wanted to dance around. They're so used to being told not to touch the art in the gallery. Yeah, I think people appreciated the idea of observing the monthly cycle of nature. And I think also with both of those projects, maybe it inspired them to find some sort of practice that they enjoyed and made each day a little bit more marked for them. Yeah, I had one lady, I make a desk calendar out of the Tiny Expanse year-long project. So there's one page for each painting. And I had a woman once who would write a little one line of poetry on the back of her calendar page each day. Thought that was a neat way to continue on.
Her flow. So nature plays an important part for inspiration, also in your art vision, because I know that you've been collaborating with environmental organizations, and you have that Confluence, I think, a project that was wonderfully postponed, unfortunately, because of the COVID. But can you tell us a little bit about your vision as far as an artist and your love of nature and the environment?
Sure. Yeah. So in 2012, I first worked with this organization called Advocates for the West, and it's a nonprofit law firm that represents the Sierra Club and different organizations like that are finding laws being broken in terms of environmental policies. I happened to meet the person running that organization and just started brainstorming with him, and I was like, Laird, where can I paint? Where have you guys been working where you can kind of direct me to go paint and highlight these landscapes? And I think I was just feeling that I have the benefit of enjoying these places that other people are really fighting to preserve. What am I contributing to that? I'm using these raw materials up that we have enough stuff in the world already. So how can I make my art practice really enhance the efforts of these environmental organizations rather than just kind of making pretty pictures? So that's kind of how I started. And since 2012, I've worked with several other organizations, but now I'm again working with Advocates for the West. One of their focuses right now is on restoring the Pacific salmon migration. And so this project Confluence follows the route of the Pacific salmon to the mountains of Idaho. I've developed a collection of paintings, about 25 of them, of the landscapes along the way. And we were planning on traveling the show and exhibiting at each of those locations last year or this year. But we've instead gone online and have a website and are creating a booklet. But we will come back and do the tour, hopefully over the summer in 2021.
That sounds like an interesting collaboration, the merging between environment and art. Is that something that you actively pursued? I mean, you happen to meet them and that there's a relationship that evolved out of that?
Yeah, these have all been projects that I've proposed, and they've ended up being very mutually beneficial. There's a lot of crossover that you can get from combining your mailing lists, and just a lot of people who are interested in the environment like to have art of beautiful landscapes in their homes, and vice versa. So it's been very mutually beneficial in terms of just getting more word out about each of our work. One organization I worked with was Idaho Conservation League, and I actually helped them develop an artist in residence program in 2014 that is now in its 7th year. So that's been cool to see that offhand idea that I had to create these paintings with their organization has continued to benefit both them and 6 or 7 different artists over the years.
2 years ago, in 2018, I took a trip to Boise, Idaho to visit a mutual friend of ours, Meredith Warren, also an artist, watercolorist. I was there just in the time for your open studio. And I was just so blown away by your work, how you diversified your business, how many people there were. You could hardly get in. You can't imagine that now, but everyone was like packed together, no masks. And it was just such a great vibe. Can you just share a little bit about your journey as far as, you are a working artist, but you found those ways to diversify your creativity? What steps have you taken, and what can we learn from it?
I'm definitely not the first person to say this, but a lot of artists are afraid of the business side of their work. And for me, it's actually a really creative part of what I do. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy developing some products that I can print my images on. And I enjoy that engagement with the outside world. And right now, being able to do it online so much is great, partly because I'm pretty introverted and would rather just be posting things on social media or like communicating online than at a big opening talking to 100 people at once. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty conducive to my personality. But I think I've just always not shied away from promoting myself, because that's the only way it's going to happen. I don't buy into the starving artist mindset that I think we're taught that real artists should have. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that becoming successful selling your work dilutes what you do. I think having to work a bunch of other jobs and draining your energy away from your art, I think that really dilutes what you do. So I find it just really important to not box yourself in or deny yourself opportunities that could really benefit your work and give you more time to do it.
Just share a little bit about what products do you have? What have you chosen? You already mentioned the calendar, but what kind of products can people find in your web shop when they visit you in your studio?
Primarily, besides original artwork, I sell prints through Etsy. And that has been a huge part of my income over the last 5 years. I probably make more money from prints than I do from originals at this point. And it's such a blessing to be able to offer the images to people who can't afford an original, but also to free up my own time so I can create fewer paintings and really do my best at them instead of feeling like I have to just churn out, 100 original paintings a year. So I think that has helped immensely. And that whole, I think the Etsy culture has been beneficial to me, just to see people, making their art and selling it, and just having that be so like normal to support other people doing that also. Let's see, other products. I've had a lot of fun this year, more being a little bit more varied than other years. I made baseball hats. I collaborated with another Etsy seller who does, fair wage products. Textile products, and the calendars, so a lot of like printed materials.
That take a lot of your time. Do you do it all yourself, or do you outsource the whole packaging and shipping and organizing all the
Oh man, I used to do it all myself, and I don't know how I did it all by myself. I might jump ahead to your question about at what moment did I feel like was there a moment I felt like I made it, and in my career. And I mean, I don't think you ever make it, because there's no guarantee you're going to sell any more paintings for the rest of your life like tomorrow. So there's nothing guaranteed, and you have to continue to move forwards and make a lot of effort. But I do remember a moment where I decided to hire a bookkeeper and an accountant, and at that moment, that realization that my time in the studio is worth paying somebody else to do this other stuff for. I think that was a big moment where it was really a validation of, this is what I need to be doing, and it's worth investing in. And since then, I have found lots of other ways to outsource. And at this point, I have a nearly full-time assistant who does my entire Etsy operation for me. So, and as well as many other studio tasks. So, I think to be able to work your way towards outsourcing some of those tedious things that take so much time is really important.
But that was all a process. It didn't happen overnight. There were many years that you did have to do everything yourself. But when you had the revenue stream, then you could start outsourcing and getting an assistant and finding the bookkeeper.
Yeah, and I think it's just this mindset of like thinking, okay, what are all these things that are important to get done, but not by me? and so that I can do the work that only I can do. And it can just be little things at first. I had an intern who was a high school student for a couple years who became an assistant. She would just come in like 2 hours a week and prime some canvases or do some tasks like that. So I think it's important to or for me, it was important just to inch into that mindset of kind of creating this community of support around my work.
And can you tell us a little bit about how are you networking? How are you keeping contact with your collectors, with potential buyers? Because, as I was saying, at that opening or the open studio a few years ago, it was just packed. There were so many people, so they must have heard about it. How do you go about communicating about an event or about an opening?
Well, that event was a wider event in Boise, the Boise Open Studios, and it's been going for about 20 years. It's a really well-attended event. So, that helps just to have that foundation to begin with. And it's all run by other artists who amazingly give tons of time putting together marketing materials and stuff. Hopefully when I don't have little kids, I can give back in those ways too. But so yeah, being part of those community events. But I think for me, like my mailing list and just like really keeping your mailing list growing over the years is what has helped me get a bigger turnout for those events.
So that's something you do intentionally?
Yeah, every event I have, I put a sign out sheet for my mailing list and have a sign up on my website. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important tool I have in terms of marketing.
And then you have your social media. What other marketing channels do you have that would be interesting for artists to know about?
Yeah, it's mostly just my newsletter and then Etsy and Instagram and Facebook. And then Etsy brings its own traffic too. Once you get enough momentum going, it sort of exponentially increases your exposure. But yeah, one thing that the daily paintings really helped was to have a really consistent social media presence. I was engaging with people every single day, not in your face like promotional way, but just sharing an image. And I think that, people looked forward to seeing what I painted every day, and yeah, just like keeping that conversation going.
So the regular contact with followers, Etsy seems to be like a strategic move as well for you, having that exposure, building up your name and your validation as an artist.
Yeah, all of those platforms help you reach people you wouldn't normally, which is really fun.
Yeah. And have you chosen like a certain strategy? Like, do you see yourself as a local artist? I mean, you're locally busy with the environmental organizations. You really promote the nature valley, the beautiful vistas of Idaho. Have you positioned yourself intentionally, or is it something that you just happened, or how can we see that?
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot. As a landscape painter, you're inherently kind of based in the landscapes that you paint. Your work is going to be more attractive to people who are familiar with those places. I have a hard time painting places where I'm not connected to. I'll do commissions where I go travel somewhere and spend a couple days and make a painting of that place. But I've tried, to continue painting California landscapes while I live in Idaho. And I don't have the rooting anymore to really make that feel very authentic. I guess then I think, okay, so am I stuck here in this local artist paradigm? And I guess at this moment in time, I just think I just don't care. Like I just need to keep making the work that feels authentic to me. And if it gains a broader appeal, then great. There's a lot of artists who have overcome those regional boundaries of their imagery, like George O'Keeffe or, like some of the California landscape painters. It doesn't even matter if you're connected to that landscape. There's just something about the work that connects you to it. So hopefully at some point I'll get a little bit more, regional and national exposure. And I dabble. I have a gallery in Bozeman, Montana that is showing my work now. And that's a place that I really like to go and paint anyways. So just trying to keep it authentic, and whatever growth comes from that, then that's great.
So is it something you do your own representation and have gallery representation, or how does the flow of sales happen with your original pieces?
So yeah, I have a gallery in Boise, Capital Contemporary Gallery, which is a co-op gallery. There's about 24 artists from Idaho in it. And that's a good platform locally to get some new exposure and new customers, and to have a community of artists too, some friends to go through this with. And then the Bozeman Gallery is kind of a newer thing, and we're kind of seeing how
In Montana.
my work fits in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I sell a lot
Okay.
just directly. A lot of people
Okay.
just visit my website. They've seen something that their friend had hanging in their house and inquired directly.
Okay, so they've seen it somewhere and then they connect with you, they see it on your website, and then you make sales from an online space and then you ship it out. Okay.
Yeah,
And
and then from the conservation organizations, I mean, I get tons still, even from 8 years ago, or yeah, 8 years ago, I get emails like, I saw your show back in 2012 with Advocates for the West and have been following you ever since, and now we're ready to buy something. So.
mm, mm. And do you have a favorite painting or a favorite vista that you love to paint? Something that that keeps coming back, and why do you love it?
I don't know if I have a favorite vista. I love to paint. We have a piece of property up on the Big Lost River in central Idaho. And I love to paint that. It has a view of Mount Bora, which is the state's highest mountain. But I love to paint new things. I love to just try a variety and try new things. So, and as far as a favorite painting, I guess I probably have like a favorite painting from every like kind of stage of my work. Usually it's either like the first or the last painting of a particular like cycle of my aesthetic, which I'm not necessarily aware of at the time, but I look back and I might be like, oh, that was sort of like the key piece of that period, and where I like figured something out. There's a particular brush stroke that I really liked.
Mm. Okay. And I know that you're a mom of two gorgeous girls. You've already mentioned that you have young children. How do you juggle being a mom and a working artist and a wife and a person?
I think juggle is the key word there. It always feels like something's going to fall on the ground. But I mean, I have a husband who's very active in parenting and has a flexible job. He's a welder. So for both of us to have endless flexibility, especially during this time, this COVID time, has been a real plus. Yeah, I mean, I think between being able to have an assistant to do a lot of the business work and then having a good co-parent, that's how it comes together.
Comes together, making good plans and scheduling and
yeah, and I'm organized ahead. And I get up early.
Okay, to get your work done. So do you have like set time? Do you have a studio at home, or do you go to a studio? How do you work?
Yeah, my studio is just a little 200 square foot studio we built in the backyard. I mostly paint in the morning, and I try to really have that as sacred studio time. So like the first 2 hours or more is just time to paint. And then because if I get onto my computer, I can get sucked in there all day and never get out. So I feel really good about the day if I've had a couple hours in the studio.
And are you mostly working on commissions, or do you give yourself commissions? Do you have like an idea? You go into the studio to make something intentionally, or how does your process work?
Yeah, I'm pretty goal oriented. I don't just go in and play very much, which probably would be pretty good for me to do, but I always know the night before like what I'm going to do the next day. And I have these series of paintings that I'm working on, like just like the ground series, or right now I'm doing a series of social distancing themed paintings. So yeah, I'll have like a series in mind, and then I'll have a random inspiration that I'll work on, and then a commission here and there. So it's a patchwork.
Yeah, so you really need to be organized to fit everything into the deadlines, and so that everything sort of works and flows together.
Yeah, and I think creating your own deadlines that works for me. Just structure my time a little bit more.
And what do you love most about being a working artist?
I love that when I go in and do the real work, the creative painting work, there's no right and wrong, and I get to do whatever I want to do. Like there's no rules except for the rules inside my own mind, and it's just really fun to have that total freedom within the canvas. And then I also love that it, being a landscape painter, I love that it makes you look around and notice things around you in a different way.
Yeah. And then what do you least like about being a working artist?
I think the insecurity of income has been the biggest challenge, but in a way that's also what pushes me too. It's like you can't just stop, like you have to keep going. It's only like it's up to me to make it happen or not. So I think that fear of failure financially is also makes me more disciplined. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but yeah.
So you really make it count. Is it something you lie awake at night about? Is it something that's always nagging, or have you been able to find sort of a balance and a peace in that's just part of a working artist's life? Is there ups and downs?
I think just in the last year or two, I've gotten to the point where just things are flowing, and it feels like a business that has its life of its own and not something I have to desperately keep making happen. So I think that it used to keep me up at night. Yeah, it used to be tremendously stressful. And, that's every artist deals with that. It's really hard. It's hard to make it support your life. So yeah, I guess I've even started to take it for granted a little bit that I don't worry about it quite so much anymore, and I just kind of keep on going. Very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful position to be in. Yeah. And is there a dream project that you'd love to work on, like a dream commission or something that you have on the horizon, like, wow, I'd love to work on that, or I'd love to paint that, or I'd love to exhibit there?
Well, I love to travel and paint, so I guess probably most of my dreams are having to do with getting commissions in amazing places and getting to go travel and paint there. Yeah, but I just love the day-to-day process of being an artist. I was a gymnast and I hated competitions. I always just liked practice, and I think I'm the same way with my art. Like I just like doing it, and I don't have these big goals of being world famous or exhibiting at a big museum. But if that happens, great. But
yeah. And a country that you'd love to paint in outside of the US? Do you have like a favorite country that you'd love to visit or revisit?
Yeah, I'd love to go back to Iceland. I spent a week painting there some years ago. I'd love to go to Patagonia and paint, but I love the challenge of new landscapes. So, there's not really anywhere I wouldn't like to go.
Different colors, different palettes.
Yeah.
Just to zoom out a little bit about art in general, why would you say that art is important? Why should it matter? Why does it matter?
I think art reminds people that there is an emotional side of life, like that that is not just all about the grind, and that it makes people stop and feel rather than just do. And I think that different artists evoke different emotions, and some it's very powerfully sad or serious, and for some it's just beautiful or funny, but I think it reconnects us to our emotional being.
And what would you say to a parent whose daughter or son, maybe they're in high school and they're considering becoming artists, working artists, visual artists? What would you advise? I know a lot of parents are a little bit apprehensive. Maybe those thoughts that you had too, is like, I need to earn a living with this. Is this a career? Is this something that can sustain me? What would you advise parents?
My parents always encouraged me and helped me develop my skills, and never said this isn't a good idea. They did encourage me to have a backup plan, which I have mixed feelings about. I feel like it's good to have a backup plan, but not put too much energy into it, because as soon as you do that, you're decreasing your likelihood of succeeding in what you really want to do. So don't have too much of a backup plan. Maybe just enough to know that you're not going to be up at night worrying about how you're going to buy groceries. Just enough for that, but not enough that you're divesting all of your energy into it. I think that the world has changed so much for artists. Like, it's so much easier to sell your own work directly and to reach more people. In a way, it's easier to be an artist than it maybe has been in other times, but there's also so many other people out there doing it. But I think that just to be able to trust yourself and not depend on an employer is in a way that's its own kind of insurance.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's scarier, to depend on somebody else for a paycheck or to depend on yourself. But if you have a passion for something you want to do, then that's certainly gonna make you happier.
Yeah. And that you can actually just get up and do the work. You've just been making since you've come out of college. You've just made art. Well, since you were, how old, you've been making art. I mean, you've actually just stayed very close to yourself you love making art, you make art, and you found ways to connect that with an art audience, connect that with collaborations, and you found ways to diversify. And that seems to be a big part of your success, that you're actually just doing what you love to do.
Yeah. And I think another aspect of that is making it feel useful, like for myself and for other people. And that's something I really gained from working with those conservation groups, is having this sense of a bigger purpose when making art can feel very navel gazing and very self-absorbed. So yeah. I like having it feel practical in a way.
And if you look back on your career, is there something that you would have loved to have done earlier or sooner? What advice would you give to a 20-year-old version of yourself, and maybe just coming out of high school? Is there something that you wished you've done sooner or differently, or you just are totally happy the way that everything went?
I'm pretty happy with the way that it went. I think like the struggles that I had in my 20s, just like financially or, just in terms of time management and feeling exhausted. I don't know. I think it just makes me appreciate where I am now more. Mm-hmm. So I guess I am happy that I was able to focus and not give up on myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that it's working for you, and that you are enjoying success, and that this is something that you can do as a livelihood. Do you have any quotes or anything that you'd like to share, like that's something that's the essence of your art, what you love to do? Some advice maybe in that? I don't know if you have like a life verse or...
This is a quote by Henry David Thoreau. So, if you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put foundations under them. So I've always liked that one a lot. Mm-hmm. There's a Georgia O'Keeffe quote that I come back to in terms of life and just also how I paint. She says, "It is only by selection, elimination, and emphasis that we get at the real meaning of things."
And how do you see that translate in your art or in your life?
Well, I see it literally in art, like, the way that my working process goes. You're as a painter, you're choosing what part of an image to include and what not to include and what to emphasize. So quite literally with that. But yeah, just in the way you create your life and what you want to include and focus on. I think that's very applicable too, and to be very intentional about it. Yes. Yeah. And the way just the process of making art is sort of training yourself to live that way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any books that you can recommend people? Something that's maybe inspired you, or that you have used as in your training, or that you just love to read?
I love listening to books on tape on audiobooks while I paint, because I think just the imagination of those authors just makes me feel more creative. Let's see. I remember a long time ago reading the book Daybook by Anne Truitt, who's a sculptor. And I think that kind of sunk in. It was just a journal of her and like how she worked. And it was a good reality of like, oh, this isn't always glorious. It's just kind of like one day at a time, you just keep going. But she also loved her routine. So yeah, I think that was good for me to read and just realize that there's no grand end to this. It's just creating yourself every day.
And then where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you? People want to know more about your art or about, your daily paintings. They want to maybe purchase something on Etsy. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on Etsy. My shop name is Tiny Expanse. And then my main website for my work is Teannalach.com. So my last name.com.
You can put it in the notes. People can go back and look at the links where they can find your beautiful art and get to know more about you, and follow you on Instagram and subscribe to your newsletter and stay connected.
Great, thank you.
Well, it was very, very useful and also very inspiring. Thank you so much, then, Rachel, for sharing your insights and your journey. And we'll be following along on the social channels. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks again, Rachel, for sharing so generously. I love how Rachel has found ways to diversify her artworks by making reproductions and selling them online, this giving a far wider audience access to her art and eventually becoming collectors of her original works. I love how she merges her passion for local vistas and working with environmental organizations as a way of giving back to all the places she so loves to paint. make sure you head over to her website and follow her on Instagram to have a closer look at her work. You'll find her details in the notes of the podcast. If you're wanting to find ways to create a revenue stream with your creativity, turning that what you're passionate about into a working profession, then join the waitlist of the Working Artist course. Enrollment will be opening in a few weeks. In this 12-week course, you'll discover ways in which you can start to use the on and offline space to promote and sell your art. Head over to my website and join the waitlist today. Well, that's all for this week. We close this episode with music by Dutch singer-songwriter Nana Adjo. Join me again next time for another episode of the Help I'm Artist podcast. And if you don't want to miss an episode, then you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to this episode. And leave a review, as this means the world to me and will make the podcast more visible and easier for other artists to find it. Thanks for that. Have an amazing week, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Until then.